If you want your team to perform at its best, you're going to occasionally have to spend some time finding the leaks. That's this week on the Badass Agile podcast. Greetings, team. Welcome to the Badass Agile podcast. I'm your host, Chris Williams. Greetings, everybody. Welcome back. Great to see you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being loyal listeners. Thank you for being fans of the Badass Agile way, fans of the show. I appreciate each and every one of you. This week, I was spending a bit of time thinking about optimization and what are some of the things you should try when looking for the leaks and the things that slow your team down. Now, before we get into it, let's take a moment to remember why we're here. To create an elite tribe of leaders who truly serve their clients and communities by doing what matters and what works, relentlessly chasing value and excellence like a badass. There are so many resources out there about what you need to do to be agile, but we're focused on who you need to become in order to lead teams. So let's hammer down those fundamentals to create a unique and powerful force in this industry. And remember, if this helps you, tell your friends. And don't forget to join us in the Badass Agile Listener Lounge on Facebook. Everything you need in the show notes below. Now let's talk about finding the leaks. Every team, no matter how perfect, no matter how well rehearsed, will have leaks. Little gaps in your performance, little gaps in your game that cause time wastage and worse, impact your bottom line. They affect your results. They affect your ability to deliver and keep your promises. They affect your ability to be a high-performing team. They affect your ability to smoothly and deftly incorporate agile techniques so that you can save time and put things in customers' hands sooner. Now, where should you look if you suspect that your team is leaking energy or time? Or if, for whatever reason, you have symptoms like we can never fit anything deliverable into a 2 or 3 or even 4-week sprint. If you find that you're constantly moving things out of the current sprint and into the next sprint because they didn't get done, if you have the creeping sense that your customer is somehow disenchanted or getting frustrated with you because you're always renegotiating or changing scope after it's been set for the sprint, or maybe your frustrations with the product owner because they're constantly making changes after the sprint has started, the problem may not rest with your estimation skill, your communication skill, your delivery skill, your commitment, or any of those other things. The problem may be looking to where you leak. So where should you look? The first place you can look is how long does it take you between the time you identify a blocker and the time that it gets resolved. Maybe even better still, the time you realize something is a blocker and the time you declare it as one could be a source of potential waste as well. Think about it. If you have something that can't move because it's waiting on resolution or completion of something else somewhere else in the organization, how many times do we do one of the following things? Do we fail to declare it as a blocker because we assume it will get fixed or go away in the not too distant future? Well, the worst thing you can do is wait until you declare it as a blocker or even a potential blocker, because the truth is, by the time you call it, it may have been sitting there for 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, more than that, without being addressed. And if you wait that long before doing something about it, it's almost certainly going to affect your velocity, your performance, your ability to deliver, however you measure it. But when things get really scary is when things are declared as blockers and then nobody does anything material about them. In the old project world, we would have a list of issues, and we were allowed to have a standing list of issues with a projected resolution date and a responsible person. And if I remember correctly, we would grant ourselves an awful lot of latitude as to when we expected those things to get resolved. We would usually take input from a counterpart or a representative from a vendor or another division or another team, and we would ask them, when do you think we can have this resolved by? And that's what would go down in the issue register. And so all of that work had to wait or stop until that blocker got cleared, which was when everyone else was good and ready to spend some time on it. In the Agile world, I think we've at least created the expectation or the atmosphere where if you're working on this particular project, you're in the room. And when something comes up as a P1, when something comes up as a blocker, either it gets resolved or we're going to have to renegotiate scope or timelines or something else. Now, we've always known that. That was the big pyramid in project management. But in an Agile team room, the expectation is we swarm that blocker. We're actually really not interested in understanding the impact and the cost of that blocker because we're not prepared to wait that long to get it resolved. In a true Agile team, when a blocker impedes progress, when a blocker threatens waste, we all stop what we're doing and sit down and figure out the shortest path to acceptable resolution, which means what's the quickest way to get this back in action and minimize the costs of that blocker. When you approach it that way, sometimes the solution to a blocker is to work around it. Sometimes the solution to a blocker is to adjust the expectation of scope. But sometimes it's actually to sit down, roll up our sleeves, and fix or finish whatever's broken or pending. And when we do that, and when we build that as a habit and do it consistently and create a culture of fixing blockers, then we're allowed to and able to perform at a much higher level. Another area of leakage and waste that you might want to look at is when do we do things more often than we should or we need to. So if by ignoring something, every time we bump into it, it requires that we fill out the same online form at a cost of 2 or 3 minutes per, it requires that we redo something that we just did the other day, now you should be looking at an opportunity to eliminate or automate or delegate that particular task or procedure. Sometimes that thing we need to do that would completely automate or relieve the need to perform a repetitive, redundant, low-value task. And we do this because we don't actually believe that we'd save time by doing the upfront work once rather than doing the back-end work 7, 8, 10, 50, 100 times. So go around and ask the team, what are the redundant, repetitive things that you do, usually multiple times a week or multiple times a day, that cost you extra time? And the only reason we haven't automated it or eliminated it is because we don't want to spend the time focusing on it. We just want to get back to work. Well, here's a great opportunity for you as a Scrum Master or a coach to seize those opportunities and to chase down some kind of resolution that'll take it out of the team room and put it somewhere else. Now, here's another one that you can probably identify with. How often do we spend doing things of little value? That's right, working on stuff that we pretend is really important, but if we're being honest, it's stuff that it's kind of like hero projects, things that we would like to be known for doing well, things that we want to get credit for, or things that we really just like doing, but in fact are not the highest priority things. Well, these are the ones where your teammates are going to have to be pretty honest about how they spend their time, but it's sometimes fun to make an exercise out of asking, where do you spend time on things of low value? Catch yourself doing it this week and try to find 1 to 3 that you can either deprioritize, eliminate, or otherwise offload. We all have this one, and if we're being honest, a lot of them are natural-born procrastination helpers, right? We're going to build a new template, we're going to set things up, we're going to automate such and such. But in reality, the things we're proposing to automate or to templatize don't really get used that often. So while they're things that we might like working on or glory projects that might make us look really good, in the end, they don't make us more productive. They don't get us closer to our goal of delivering customer value early and often. Now here's another area where you can look. What habits do we have as individuals or as a team that no longer serve us? Every team has rituals. Some of those are going down to grab donuts as a team before we do the daily stand-up. Some of them are rituals and habits that we have before we release code to production. It's worthwhile every now and again to look at those rituals and habits, the checklists that we have before we do something important, and ask ourselves, do we need to check this every time? And more importantly, do we need to do this every time? So let's imagine, for example, you're doing demos, and in every demo, 3 or 4 defects are bound to come up. Something pops up every time. Nothing is ever perfect. Now let's say you screen grab the entire demo, so you record the whole thing. And then after the demo's over, you also sit down and plug all the defects into a defect register. Well, what if you figured out that because you record every demo, you don't need to go and scribe every single mistake? Because all the learning, all the incidents, everything that happened during the demo is already there, captured on video. Why not use that? There's an example where by writing it down, you were effectively doing it twice. And why? To make it easier for other people in the team to access systematically, to have a living record of all the defects and all of their statuses. Well, if that's important to you, of course, you have to document it. But if that's less important to you, It might be an awakening to realize that you already have everything you need captured on video, so you might as well use that. These are just a few examples of where you should be looking to tune performance. And you might say, oh, well, that's, I don't want to do that because it's too much investigating and criticizing and too much digging and examining. But the reality is this, that if you run out of time in a sprint to deliver your stuff, you're going to go right back to the behaviors that we've been trying to avoid since, the mid-90s or the early 2000s. Is that when we come up on release day, which now we do every 2 weeks, having people work 18, 20, 24 hours a day trying to get it perfect in time to ship. That's how you burn people out. That's how you make them miserable. So I'd rather make them miserable by examining some of our technique and seeing if there isn't room to improve it, make it simpler, make it better, eliminate redundancies, eliminate wasted time. So check that out with your teams this week and let me know how it goes. You can reach out at badassagile.com or find me on Twitter at badass_agile. I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for being a true believer. I love you all. And until we meet again, stay badass.